Welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of Fair Territory. We are live. I'm Ken Rosenthal here with Alanna Rizzo. Alanna, this week started off with the Ronald Acuna news, continued with the Angel Hernandez news, and we've got even more news to discuss on this Thursday.
Well, there's certainly not a lack of things to discuss. And don't forget, guys, you can get your questions in to the chat for Ken Rosenthal. We're going to load that up here in just a little bit. We're going to get to Grillin Ken in just a moment. But Ken, let's get to what you started talking about earlier this morning in our production meeting, an article that you had written for The Athletic as we get to the lead about a situation now with Negro League baseball statistics being incorporated into Major League Baseball. Some say it's a long time coming, but Ken, it doesn't come without controversy as well.
No, there are a lot of people who have questions about the league's decision to incorporate the Negro League stats. And the way I started my column today, Alanna, is by saying to all those questioning the legitimacy of incorporating the Negro League statistics into the Major League official records, I asked this question. How legitimate were the statistics pre-1947 when Major League Baseball was essentially an all-white men's club? Now, I understand that it was jarring for a lot of people, even myself, to see Josh Gibson suddenly atop the leaderboards in many categories, but it was even more jarring when MLB did not recognize the Negro Leagues as fully as they should. And starting in 2020, that changed. They recognized the Negro Leagues as a major league. And now that you have this taking place, with the statistics becoming an official part of baseball's history, it opens up people's eyes a little bit. And it makes you want to wonder, or makes you think about, okay, what was Josh Gibson really like? It sparks your curiosity. And I know people will say, well, hey, come on, you can't compare those statistics to Major League statistics. Whoa. Statistics always, in this game's history, have been an apples and oranges situation. You can't compare a lot of different things. Some would say you cannot compare Barry Bonds' home run record to Hank Aaron's home run record because of the steroid era that Bonds was involved in. There was the steroid era. There was the dead ball era. There are seasons that have been shortened. There are all kinds of disparities that have taken place over the years. I refer to a couple more in that column I wrote today. So this is a matter of righting a past wrong. It's a matter of acknowledging 2,300 players who were major league caliber players. And to me, it's a great thing for the game. It enhances the game's history, and we go forward now with all of these players in the same mix.
And Ken, you said something earlier today that really stuck out to me. It's one thing to say you can't compare eras because it's comparing apples to oranges, but it's a whole other thing entirely when you realize the whole reason they had to be incorporated to begin with is because they weren't allowed to play in the major league. So that's why there was a whole, separate category anyway. I mean, that's important to recognize that they weren't allowed to play and now they're finally getting their fair due.
Well, that's really important. That's the genesis of this whole thing. That until 1947, baseball prohibited blacks, people of color, from participating and playing in Major League Baseball. That's why we have this situation. So if you're going to talk about it and criticize the statistics and all the things that MLB might be doing, whoa, let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the source of the original problem, which was these players were excluded. These players had to barnstorm and find ways to make money because they were excluded. It's a whole situation that was an ugly part of this game's history. Now, can MLB, by incorporating these statistics, make it all go away? No. And no one should forget why these statistics were created in the first place, because these players were not allowed to play in MLB. So the whole thing is an important part of the game's history. The exclusion, yes. The performances as well by the Negro Leagues players. And now we've seen Negro Leagues players honored in the Hall of Fame. Now we get them to be officially recognized statistically. It is a great day, a long day coming for MLB.
I certainly cannot understand what it's like to be an African-American baseball player, but I did have a interesting text conversation, Ken, with an African-American male who is very, very knowledgeable when it comes to the sport of baseball. And he said that he did not like the incorporation of the Negro League statistics into Major League Baseball statistics because, in his words, it is whitewashing history. I mean, this is a person that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And it was an interesting take from an African-American male who loves the sport. What is your take on that sort of criticism of this?
I've heard that too, Alana, and it's a fair point. And it's a reasonable concern as well among African Americans and blacks who are looking at this and saying, whoa, 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 MLB is trying to make this all go away. I get that. It is a complex question without an easy answer because certainly there is an aspect to this. And as I wrote today, any celebration of this should be muted because of the history. But at the same time, the idea that the statistics should remain separate, that bothers me too, because the separation is what the problem was in the first place. And I don't know that it is a wise idea to perpetuate that separation by making these statistics into a different category. This, in my view, is a better solution. It's not a perfect solution, of course, and there is never going to be a perfect solution. But as I said earlier, we cannot forget the history. This does not change anything about what happened. We need to keep remembering why this whole situation became a thing. And it became a thing because blacks were not allowed to play MLB until Jackie Robinson came along and broke the color barrier.
Do different eras need to be contextualized, Ken? Is that important?
It's really important, and it's why these conversations are so interesting. Alana, we don't know if Josh Gibson was a better player than Babe Ruth. We'll never know that. And we'll never know if Josh Gibson's great 1943 season, which consisted of only 69 games, would have been the same over 162. But this is why we have these discussions. We try to educate ourselves. We try to learn more. And these debates have been part of the game's history forever. We've been talking about these kinds of things always. Before Bonds versus Aaron, what was it? It was McGuire versus Maris and all of these things. And of course, that changed over time as we learned more about what McGuire did. So to me, it's cool. It's one of the coolest parts of baseball. No other sport has this kind of ongoing discussion about different players' places in history. And in my view, now that the Negro Leagues players are part of that discussion, as I said before, it makes that discussion even better.
Yeah, now it's interesting to see when some people's heads fall off when we talk about comparing Shohei Ohtani to the Babe. All right, we move on here on the lead as we talk about Paul Skenes, a young and up-and-coming player with a lot of fanfare. Ken, he had his third outing on his 22nd birthday yesterday and looks just as much of the part that he's playing as the game's best superstar.
I'm with you, Alana. And he is right now the talk of the game as far as pitching is concerned. And every start now is an event with him. And let's look at his statistics so far because they're rather amazing for a guy who, as you said, just turned 22 yesterday, was drafted only last year, is still relatively young in professional baseball. He has made 4 starts now. 4 starts, 22 innings, 2.45 ERA, and here's what I love, 30 strikeouts and 5 walks. 30-5 strikeout to walk ratio. He's a guy with that funky pitch, the splinker. It's a splitter with sinker action. It's the same pitch Yohan Duran throws for the Minnesota Twins. And to me, it makes Skenes that much more fascinating. He has this kind of different pitch that others don't for the most part. And as well, he has the huge fastball. The one thing that he has not done yet is complete more than 6 innings. Wow, that's really terrible. He'll get there as well. And one of the key questions for the Pirates is going to be, okay, do they go with him every 5th or 6th day the rest of the season? How long can this continue? That is something to be talked about later. But for now, we can just enjoy the Paul Skenes show because every 5th or 6th day, it's pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's great to see, of course, a young superstar coming up in the game and being able to live up to the billing, at least so far. It's Barnum and Bailey, Ken, in Queens. I tell you what is going on with the New York Mets? I think a way to describe it perhaps is it's a circus.
That's a fair word, Alana. And you and I at MLB Network over the years have worked with a lot of Mets fans. And we know how fatalistic they are, always thinking that the sky is falling. Well, in this case, they're actually onto something because the Mets are a complete mess. This is the team with the highest payroll in the sport. They've lost 13 of 16. They're 11 under 500 in a weak National League. Let's face it. It's the Braves, Phillies, and Dodgers. The rest of the teams are just, for the most part, okay. They're 16 games behind the Phillies in the National League East. They're 6 out in the wild card race. So all of these things are going on, and I want to take people back to what Steve Cohen said in November 2020 when he was introduced for the first time as this team's owner. And if you remember, fans treated Cohen as really a savior. Here's what he said. If I don't win a World Series in the next 3 to 5 years, I would like to make it sooner. Then obviously I would consider that slightly disappointing. I'm not in this to be mediocre. I want something great. Okay, this is year 4. Year 4 of Cohen's regime, and they're not going to win the World Series this year. Chances are they're not going to win it next year either. And what Cohen is finding is what so many owners find, what so many people find with this sport. It is humbling, and it is difficult to win. Ask the Dodgers, who have won 1 World Series in this great run of theirs in the COVID-shortened season. This is not easy. So the real question now for the Mets, Alanna, in my view, is what happens at the deadline? Because they are trending towards seller. Alonso got hit on the hand yesterday. We'll have to see how he is, waiting for that report right now. Edwin Diaz going on the injured list, shoulder impingement. And then, of course, they had all the shenanigans that took place on one day in Queens, Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, we're going to get into the Jorge Lopez ejection a little bit later on in this segment. You said they may not make, they may not make the World Series this year or next year. They may not even make the postseason this year, Ken. I think we can safely say, at least I'm saying it here on Fair Territory on May 30th, the Mets are done. The Mets are done for this season. They were swept by the Dodgers, obviously. You have the injury to Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso. Goodness knows what's going to happen there. I mean, does that change your mind at all with whether or not the Mets sign Alonso to a long-term deal? Not the injury, but just the lack of production so far in what is a walk year for him and kind of where this team is going in the future.
Alanna, I've never been confident that David Stearns, as president of baseball operations, was going to be on board with giving Alonso the deal that he wants. Joel Sherman's reported that they offered him $150 million plus. He turned that down, obviously, because he wants more. And he's a first baseman. He's going into his 30s. It's not a great scenario that teams view for that kind of player at that kind of age. So I was never confident there. But at the same time, Alonso means a lot to the team. He is a guy who has proven he can play in New York, which is something Aaron Judge did and which is what made him so valuable to the Yankees. But at the same time, he's a power hitter who this year is not, so far, having his best year. So at this point, if I had to guess, I would guess he'd be the biggest name available at the trade deadline. And if he gets traded, guess what? He's not coming back, because once that cord is cut, it becomes that much more difficult to bring the player back into your good graces, even if the Mets want to do that. And I'm not convinced that they do.
Steve Cohen has the money. Is Juan Soto the off-season answer for the Mets? He hasn't signed yet with New York. Steinbrenner said, obviously, he's willing to talk to, extension, but yet they don't have the money, which is talking out of both sides of their mouth. Is Juan Soto the answer for the Mets?
Well, here's the thing, Alanna. We know money talks, right? That Juan Soto, represented by Scott Boras, is going to the highest bidder. And if the Mets are the highest bidder, maybe they get Juan Soto. But 2 things. 1, the Mets need more than Juan Soto. And 2, Juan Soto is no dummy. He sees what's going on over there. He sees what has gone on the last couple of years and really for quite a bit longer than that. So, okay, maybe the Mets offer him the most money, but maybe he then goes to the Yankees, a team that has had more success, and says, guys, just get me close, get me to the same level, whatever. I don't know that this enhances their chances of getting Juan Soto. It might enhance their desperation, but if I'm Juan Soto, I'm thinking twice about this whole thing.
Yeah, you're staying in New York and you're playing for a contender versus a pretender, at least what it's been over the last couple of years. All right, we want to welcome Baseballism to our show here, not only to Fair Territory, but to Foul Territory and all of our platforms here. Baseballism is a lifestyle brand. Obviously, they're the official, baseball provider, I guess, of Major League Baseball, and it's awesome. I've known these guys for so long, Ken, and I don't know, it's really hard to see our shirts right now, but they just came out with the Tony Gwynn line, which I absolutely love, and it's now available on baseballism.com. Tony Gwynn Perfection shirt and cap is available for pre-order. A lot of this stuff is already being sold out. Baseballism is honestly such great merchandise. I've been a fan of theirs for years. So welcome to the Fair Territory and Foul Territory family. But Tony Gwynn, such a special player, Ken. You had the opportunity to work with him a lot. What are some of your favorite Gwynn memories?
My favorite Gwynn memories are simply from interviewing him. and he was one of the best interviews, if not the best, in the entire sport and of all the players I've covered. He was not only friendly and always willing to talk, but he was really insightful and would be happy to explain his craft and go through everything. Now, there is a picture from the
Oh
2001
my
All-Star game
goodness.
in Seattle. That's me on the left, and that's Nestor Aparicio. These were guys, or we were Sporting News Radio colleagues at the time, and that's Tony just sitting down with us at the All-Star game. I looked a lot groovier then, but again, Tony Gwynn just always willing to take the time and talk, and he was just a great soul. I guess that's the way I would put it. And his son, Tony Gwynn Jr., now a Padres broadcaster, many of the same qualities, and he's carrying on the family legacy in the best way possible.
Yeah, he's just such a wonderful Tony Gwynn Jr., such a wonderful guy, and I am assuming his dad the same exact way. And can you just put into context what a special player he was? I mean, the man never struck out. His plate discipline was ridiculous. He was just such a solid player up and down.
Oh, he was more than solid. He was brilliant. And all of the things we talk about with Arise now, that was Tony Gwynn kind of times two. Tony Gwynn was the best version of Luis Arise you could imagine. He was better than Luis Arise. He's in the Hall of Fame, for goodness sake. And the 5-6 hole, of course, was what he was most famous for, shooting the ball the other way. But he could do a lot of things. He was once a great basketball player as well. He eventually went to baseball after playing in college. But with the bat, he was just a magician. And his thought process was ahead of its time. He, in today's game, with all the analytics and everything going on, he'd be entirely comfortable because he was there already. Now, he might not have used the same verbiage and the same reference points and all of that, but that was kind of the way he approached things. And you talk to some of those great Braves pitchers from the 90s, Smoltz and Glavine and Maddox. He was the guy that they had the hardest time with.
Yeah, he coached Steven Strasburg, of course, at San Diego State. And we talked so much about Steven Strasburg and his debut, and that's kind of where Paul Skenes is right now. Tony Gwynn, an unbelievable person. So again, Baseballism, welcome to the family. We're so happy that you're here. The Tony Gwynn collection is out now. You can pre-order Baseballism. Just an awesome, awesome company, the official lifestyle brand of baseball. All right, time now for Grillin Ken, as we told you guys to get your questions into the chat so we can ask Ken Rosenthal some questions. It's always great to have these opportunities, Kenny, for guys and gals to get in and ask you a question. What's our first question here as we get ready for Grillin Ken? If we don't have any yet, we can go on to Dude and Dork and kind of circle back to Grillin Ken. So let's do that. Let's get to Dude and Dork really quick. Who is your? Oh wait, we do have a question. Fantastic. Lashiva Jones says, "How are the Brewers so successful this season?" That's a great question. It's fun to watch a very small market team have success. I agree.
And Lasheva, I've been with you all year on this. And them, the Brewers, and the Guardians are my two favorite stories of the season. And they're kind of similar in the sense that both lost legendary managers. Craig Counsell went to the Cubs. Terry Francona retired. Yet the Brewers have this underdog quality about them. And I asked Christian Yelich about it a couple of weeks ago, and he said, listen, there is an understanding here, an accountability of how we're going to go about things, how we're going to practice, how we're going to play, and how this is all going to work. And it comes from guys like Yelich, of course, but keep in mind, they not only lost Counsell, they lost Corbin Burns, they haven't had Brandon Woodruff, they haven't had Devin Williams all season. And still, they come up with these young position players who are really good. They've got relief pitchers that they kind of found out of nowhere. Brian Hudson, good example. Alanna, you might remember him, DFA'd by the Dodgers to make room for Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and now he's like a potential all-star. So they routinely get the most out of the least, and it's just impressive to see. Pat Murphy's done a great job, just as Stephen Vogt has done a great job in Cleveland, and hats off to the Brewers. They've got it
Yeah.
going.
And let's not forget that Josh Hader, of course, left at the end of last year to the Houston Astros. Seems like the Brewers knew something was going on there. I had a conversation earlier today with Joey Ortiz, their third baseman. I mean, this is a guy that came over in that Corbin Burns trade, and he's kind of living up to the billing. He's had a really nice offensive season so far. He knew he wasn't going to play shortstop with Willie Adames there, but it's kind of like the resurgence of guys finding their own way with the Brewers organization. They kind of make the most of who they have. Is that right?
That is right. And hey, Joey Ortiz came over in a huge trade. They also got DL Hall, a pitcher that they are quite high on in that trade as well, for a potential free agent. That trade is looking pretty good, but that trade doesn't even compare to the Contreras trade. And that was one in which they parted with a guy that they had. That was a brilliant move. So all of these things together, the on-field vibe, what the front office has done, even without David Stearns, now Matt Arnold runs the team. It's just really impressive. And it's kind of a model for what a low-revenue team should be.
Yeah, one of the greatest organizations out there. I had an opportunity to cover the Brewers. I lived in Wisconsin for 3 years, loved it. Great fans, great tailgating, best brats, best cheese curds. All right, thank you for that question, Ella Shiva Jones. All right, next question is talking about a second half surge. This is from Jerry. Who's your team that's out of it right now, Ken, but can come back big time in the second half? That's putting you on the spot. That's a good question.
That's a tough one, but I would say Houston. And
Okay.
they're not really out of it. They're kind of in the mix, but they're going to play better, I believe. Jose Abreu came back this week, looks better. It's not great. They've had hiccups. They did not have a great series against Seattle, just completed. In fact, Seattle really looks like the class of the AL West right now. But Houston is Houston. And I will also mention the Texas Rangers in this regard. They've got a ton of pitching coming back. They eventually are going to find their offense too. So those two teams in particular, I would expect are going to play a lot better as the season goes on.
All right, so you're expecting a second half surge out of the AL West. What about the Blue Jays? That's a question that we have here on Grillin Ken. I know. J Mac wants to know the Blue Jays compared to expectations have been an absolute disaster this year. Are Bichette and Vlad just not the guys, or is there a bigger problem there? A lot of blame gets put on those two big names, but it can't be just about them.
I'm with you, Alana. And J-Mac, that's a fair question because those are the two biggest names, but this is a system-wide failure, in my opinion. And they have underachieved now. This is really the second year, and you can go back even further maybe if you'd like and say they haven't been who they should be. With that pitching staff, the rotation in particular, this should be one of the more formidable teams in the major leagues, right there with Seattle as far as the rotation is concerned. And yet, while they get good starting pitching, their offense has been an utter disappointment. Now, yes, Vlad and Bo are part of that, but it goes well beyond them. And it seems to me it's one of those things you can't quite put your finger on. You don't really know what it is, but something's amiss there. And I don't know how to define it, but that team is facing a major crossroads. And as we get to the deadline, it's going to be real interesting to see how they go about this.
Yeah, it just seems like Toronto's been a little bit disjointed all season long. I had such high hopes for them in the AL East. I've been proven wrong so far, at least 2 months into the season. All right, time now for, we have one more. Great. It's a super chat from Daniel. What is up, Daniel? Why do the central divisions always seem to be the most balanced? It's because it's the middle of the country. They're just balancing out the rest of the country, Daniel. This seems like it has been true for years. What's your take on it, Ken?
That's a good point, Daniel. And to me, it's because there is never a big payroll team in those divisions, or at least hasn't been for the most part. The Cubs could be that team, but they're really not that team. So you don't have the equivalent of the Phillies and Braves and the Dodgers in the National League, the Yankees in the American League, Texas Rangers, what they've been in the American League. Now, obviously, there are other teams that haven't spent as much, that don't spend as much, that have done really well. The Orioles are the latest example. But the Central divisions, for the most part, and I'm generalizing a bit here, are full of such teams. Those are who comprises those divisions, and that's why it's been seemingly more balanced.
I love what the Royals are doing. Bobby Witt Jr., American League Player of the Week. I don't know why my phone is ringing. Apparently I have to do something. All right, let me ask you this. Dude and dork. I always come up with dorks. It's always so much easier for me to come up with dorks than it is for me to come up with dudes. But let's start with your dude, Ken.
A lot of candidates this week. I was Luis heel, but it's hard to ignore what Corey Seager is doing right now for the Texas Rangers. Now, remember, he had that hernia surgery. He got off to a slow start. Slow start no more. 8 home runs in his last 8 games. 12-game hitting streak. 9 homers in that streak. 349 batting average. OPS of almost 1,500. He's back, folks, as the Diamondbacks learned again, just as they learned last October in the last 2 nights. Corey Seager, dude of the week.
I'm a huge Corey Seager fan. I remember when he came up, when he got called up to the Dodgers, it was just so special. Great baseball family, obviously, with Kyle and Justin as well. All right, my dude, you're not going to be surprised by this because I would always pick 4 legs over 2. But let's take a listen to JP Crawford's pups. This is courtesy of the Mariners on X. JP Crawford's Huskies. They're great. That's a very vocal breed. So if you don't like noise, Ken, do not get a Husky. They're smart, they're active, they're wonderful. And they loved when Papa had the walk-off for the M's. How great is that? They can recognize their dad on the, maybe mom got them riled up. I don't know, but that's fantastic.
I don't know, Alanna, but you just said it. They're smart. And obviously they were having a good reaction to what JP did.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, JP Crawford. That's awesome. Anytime I can get a dog in the show, I am on board. What about your dork of the week? There always seems to be enough of these to choose from.
Oh, there's always plenty, Alanna. And I'm going to go with Chicago White Sox manager Pedro Grifol. Now, he's in the middle of a mess. We all know that. It's not easy being Pedro Grifol with that team right now. But in these circumstances, the last thing you want to do is rip your players. Now, I know a lot of fans like that. Hey, why isn't our manager tougher? Aaron Boone gets criticized for just the opposite, for always being so positive. Well, guys are positive. Managers are positive because players don't react well when they're negative. So let's look at what Grifol said, because it wasn't great. He basically said initially that the players were bleep, bleep, flat. And then the next day, after several players kind of spoke up and said, all right, he's entitled to his opinion, Grifol said, you know what? I'm doubling down on what I said yesterday, okay? I thought we were flat. They have their opinions. I have mine. This is not divided by any means. Pedro, it sure sounds divided. I don't think you should have gone there. It's not a good sign, and it's not a good sign for your future. Pedro Grifol, I have a lot of respect for this guy. He's a good baseball man, but he's dork of the week.
Yeah, that's not a good look, of course. Anytime you're calling out your players like that, it's been a mess, obviously, for Chicago since his tenure has gotten off to a pretty rocky start. My dork of the week, and I'm going to go 50-50 on this. My dork of the week, obviously, we talked about it earlier in the show, Ken, but you look at what happened right now with the Mets, and Jorge Lopez throwing his glove into the stands is why I'm giving him dork of the week. I understand that you're frustrated. I understand that you're frustrated with your performance, but that act of being a petulant child and throwing your glove into the stands, I don't like. What I also don't like is when asked after the game if he regretted the decision and he didn't show any remorse. I'm not going to get on him for what he said about whether or not he was, the worst player on the worst team, because I do believe there's some of that can be lost in translation. I'm disappointed that there was not a translator there. I don't want to get on players where English is not their first language, because you don't know if they're certain of the question, if the response is exactly what they mean. So to that, I want to say he gets a pass. I think that could have been handled better. But throwing your glove into the stand and then saying you don't regret that, I'm pretty sure his tenure with the Mets is over. There's likely going to be a DFA situation for Lopez today.
No question. And that was the worst part of it. Throwing the glove, showing your frustration in that sense. The manager, Carlos Mendoza, said afterward, that is unacceptable. And I'm with you, Alanna. It seems like what was going on with the post-game comments and the translation, there's some question about what exactly was said. We can give him a pass for that. That's a problem that a lot of times surfaces in these situations, and I don't want to judge that. This is also a player who had to take a mental health break last year, so we have to keep that in mind as well. But my gosh, you can't do what he did on the field and then afterward say, I don't regret it. That is why
the week. Ken's always great to be with you. You're going to be back on Tuesday with another episode of Fair Territory. Again, welcome Baseballism to the Foul Territory family. We're happy to have you here. And also BetMGM, thanks for being such a great partner so far for us. Once a day, play are free to play BetMGM Swing for the Fences for a chance to win daily prizes. Play as the batter and pick up an area of the strike zone. Get a single, double, triple, home run, or fly out. Free to play promotion from BetMGM Sportsbook. BetMGM Sportsbook account holders who play our BetMGM Swing for the Fences will have the opportunity to win a reward if they get a hit. Reward types include parlay boost tokens, odds boost tokens, SGP boost tokens, bonus spins in eligible casino states, and bonus bets. All rewards expire in 24 hours. Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's going to do it for Ken and I here on Fair Territory. You can join Clint Pasillas and myself on Dodgers Territory coming up at 12 Pacific and 3 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.